Okay, it's been a while, but I'm back. Why was I gone? The simple answer that many people might already be aware of is that a new game came out, a new MMO actually to be precise, called New World, and I've been grinding it nonstop since the initial release on September 28th. That puts me at a little over a week of game time, which has allowed me to max out my character level, start to max out certain crafting, gathering, and refining skills, and participate in a pretty big cross-section of endgame content. The background right now is B-roll from the leveling process, which I gathered for my review, but more recently we have been killing open world bosses, exploring the final quest chains and the endgame zones, and coordinating with other companies to attack or defend territory. The game has a lot to offer, and I haven't done it all, but I have played to a point where you can say I am truly, certainly, smack dab in the middle of what should be considered endgame content. This leads me to the main point. After all that time, after all that effort, and all that grinding, I am very, very worried about the future of this game. I will still do a complete comprehensive review. It will be an actual review, by the way, predicated on experience and personal progress. Not some sort of, I made it to level 27 and I don't have the time, so I'm going to review it without knowing what the hell is actually going on type video. But that's coming soon. And a lot of people are looking at reviews right now that are based on footage and player experience that does not count and should not be taken seriously because it has not gone far enough to understand the full mechanics of the game. Just keep that in mind, but whatever. Probably in another week right now, like in one more week, I'll be ready to do that, give or take. But right now, I want to talk about why I am actually horribly worried about the game's longevity in its entirety and future. Because, in my opinion, it looks really, really bleak. Let me preface what comes next with a bit of a disclaimer here. This is not about content. The problems I see don't hinge on content depth or quantity. There is plenty here, and I'm not saying, oh, I rushed through the game and I'm bored now. Not in the slightest, okay? Not at all. I am not one of those people to grind to 60 and then complain that there's nothing to do, because there is actually a lot to do here in this game. I am the company's chef, if you will, right? Making meals with good stats, the potion maker, which by itself means plenty of shit to do, because I can grind ingredients and make incredibly powerful food while maxing out secondary skill sets. There's a lot here, and I'm not saying the game will die after a self-inflicted burnout where I rush through the content, so please keep that in mind. The thing that makes me worried is player population. That might seem utterly ridiculous in a game where almost 750,000 concurrent players logged in over the past couple of days, but let me explain further. This game exploded in popularity well and truly beyond what anyone actually expected, including Amazon. They were not prepared for this, and on launch day, there were player queues in the tens of thousands for certain servers. That would suggest that the game has no chance of dying, none at all, but keep in mind that a queue in the tens of thousands for certain regions and servers means that a lot of people literally didn't get in for days on end. What's worse, some of them got kicked or disconnected during their play session when they finally did get in, which put them right back in the queue, waiting again. At one point, I believe, there were more people waiting to play than actually playing, because servers only have a 2,000 player maximum population. That's a really small number when even non-primary servers have a queue in the thousands, and the days following launch were, in no uncertain terms, a disaster. Still, a disaster of having too many players isn't the worst disaster to have. The real disaster was Amazon's response. To solve this issue, which must absolutely be solved, I acknowledge that, they decided to open a slew of brand new servers that were not initially planned on launch day. This was, in my opinion, a horrifying choice because it created what are essentially throwaway servers, where players were joining just to get out of the queue, and instead of playing on the same server as their preset company or their best time zone, they were playing on one of the brand new last-ditch effort fresh ones, which in all honesty are going to die very quickly if they haven't died already. By itself, that isn't so bad. The game now has about 600 active servers, I believe, across the entire world, and according to population metrics released by the site newworldstatus.com, we can see that the concurrent player count has remained somewhat steady, with a beginning decline, while the players in queue has fallen to near zero. That might seem good, but if we compare that to launch day metrics, the combined totals of queue and in-game player count is actually falling quickly. Combined totals for day one were nearly 600,000 in the EU, as an example, and now they are down over 25% to about 440,000. That's still an incredibly big number, and this might all seem utterly ridiculous, but if we think about that for just a minute here, it becomes obvious quickly that they are going to have server population issues across a wide range of their 600 or so-ish individual servers. If population is at or above, I heard rumors that they were increasing that cap to allow more players in. If maximum population is at or above 2,000, designed in both layout and content depth for a number near to that point, on 600 active servers, that would be 1.2 million concurrent players. The population is rapidly declining to a point where it will soon be, very soon, under the halfway mark on that goal, and when that inevitably happens, they will need to do server merges. Here's where the second problem comes into play, but we can't even talk about that yet because releasing dozens of brand new servers during the launch window wasn't the only change that Amazon made. They also decided to bar new character creation on certain servers to stop those that they believed to be overpopulated from being strained further. This was a good temporary measure, perhaps, but as far as I'm aware, at least on my own server, Heliopolis, which as far as I was told is one of or was one of the top 10 populated servers in North America East, as far as I am aware, this measure is still in place, meaning new players cannot create fresh accounts or join many of the larger servers, because fresh characters are being barred from creation. The effects of this are now readily apparent. Walking through early zones is becoming a ghost town because low levels have either found time to increase their level or quit the game. The starter zones are depopulated, and that would be fine in a lot of circumstances for a lot of games if the entire economy is not built like a pyramid on top of low-tier resources. To explain this, I need to do a little bit of math. I'll use demo numbers to make it easier, but the simple formula loosely applies to almost every crafting profession in the game, and crafting is a central pillar for the strongest gear in the entire world, so keep that in mind. To make, let's say, and this is just not even one of the extreme examples, but to make, let's say, iron bars, you need, again, just an example, 4 iron ore. Then to make steel bars, you need 2 iron bars, right? So 2 iron from 4 iron each bar to make 1 steel. That brings the total from 4 iron ore to 8 iron ore. Then you need 2 steel to make 1 star metal, the next tier up in resource. That's 16 iron. Then you need 2 star metal to make 1 orichalcum, which means 32. Then you need like 48 orichalcum for a set of tools, which means you need over 1,500 iron ore to make 1 set of orichalcum tools, and that's not even one of the more extreme examples. It's like this for a lot of the professions. There is an abundance of top-tier resources that simply can't be used, and anyone who's ground out this game as much as I have, or anyone similar, will be able to attest to this. You have thousands of the top-tier resources that you simply can't use, because the bottleneck always comes back to low-tier materials. And when you prevent new players from being created, you cut off the necessary supply line for those resources, and force the hardcore audience to literally stop what they're doing in endgame content, for the most part, return to the newbie zones, and grind out resource runs. There is a glut forming in the top of the market right now. Most people may not see it. It may not be there on every single server, but it's starting, mark my words. And unless they do something to remedy that, there will be ramifications that cause a larger than expected number of players to quit the game. Or, even more reasonable than that, take a short break from the game. The thing is, a break, per se, is just as bad as quitting in most circumstances because this game requires a critical mass of players in every faction to be online, or things devolve into absolute chaos. The war system, which I find to be fundamentally very cool but practically very tedious, is extremely fast-paced. I can't speak for every server here, but there are territory conflicts constantly, which prompted us to have an impromptu cross-faction arrangement on our server, personally, deliberately to start staving off the coming player-base collapse. These conflicts require enough players online to actually defend, from all 3 factions, multiple per night. Not to mention corrupted invasions, which means you need a healthy section of that 2,000 player metric to be interested and high enough level for that content, and the high enough level part won't matter pretty soon, but you need enough of them to be interested and on Discord and coordinating and voice chat and whatever, and you need all those players to be spread across the 3 factions somewhat evenly to make it all possible. Anecdotally, for my server in particular, that's falling apart. There is an unequal spread. Green has far more people and companies. Purple apparently had one of their territory holding company leaders banned recently for toxicity, and so the members allegedly might leave as well. And Yellow has a territory controlled by an AFK group whose leader isn't even logging in. It's very close to becoming a 1v1, with the third faction, either Yellow or Purple at this stage, pushed out completely. And there are ways to prevent that, but it will require, in no uncertain terms, a huge amount of cooperation and compromise by the player base and the leadership of those companies. This won't be true in the same way for every single server, but it's fundamentally true for many. I'd say most servers at this early point in time, and that's what's really troubling. It's super early still. Balance for those 3 factions is fragile, and when the momentum gets going, it can be very hard to stop it. That momentum can push one side out completely or cause large groups of players to become frustrated and fed up with the game, which again feeds right back into the problem, because if a faction is getting crushed and the members decide they don't have the energy for it for a couple of days, it will only ever accelerate. Amazon wants this level of conflict. They want a war to be declared an hour after the previous one was fought, and the fatigue here, and that's the important word, the fatigue here, of organizing 50 versus 50 PvP slogs for fort control literally every single day, it's wearing out even the largest companies. And there's this really natural phenomenon where there's kind of a combination. Like a lot of companies come together. Members are gravitating towards central companies that now have offshoots. They'll have, like, we have two companies, two 100-person companies. It's not just one. There's a company on our server, I think, that's working on their fourth, which is 400 people in that one company, right? So you're getting these like large mega companies instead of a whole bunch of 100-person smaller ones. That, I don't know why, but it's a natural process, and I've seen it played out on a bunch of different servers from people that I've talked to. So it's natural, right? And organizing the 50 versus 50 for a whole bunch of different kind of similar companies on the same night, right? It's wearing out everybody. It really is. Combine that with a falling player count, players spread across 600 servers when there's no realistic way to actually populate all of them to critical mass, and many were just a knee-jerk reaction to high queue numbers, and the issue of new characters not being allowed on certain high population servers that aren't even cracking 1,800 player counts during peak hours now, by the way, like ours, which creates a glut in the pyramid market on top of it all, and hopefully people can start to see why I'm so horribly worried about this game's longevity. A lot of this reminds me of a game called Rend, which I played for literally hundreds of hours. Rend was an indie survival game with MMO-esque dynamics. There was a three-way faction war, sound familiar? 20v20v20, and then when launch day happened, they had far more players than they expected. Their response? Open a huge number of brand new fresh servers. The result? Many of those servers died fast, leaving players stranded. Almost every server, with a couple of exceptions, ended up skewing to one side completely and destroying the three-way dynamic, utterly and totally. And ultimately, the game is literally dead now. I don't believe New World, backed by Amazon, is headed for the exact same fate, but it's oddly reminiscent to me, and if you look at the similarities, it's kind of eerie, and it's contributing to my level of concern here. But we're not done. Another measure Amazon has taken is to offer free server changes at some point in the future. This is honestly a wild card, but could also be a complete unmitigated disaster. Free server transfers, theoretically, will allow those that skip the launch window queues to play on a fresh throwaway server to transfer to where they actually want to play. It doesn't solve the market issue, but it could solve the 600 server issue, right? There's too many of them, where most of those have no future. However, unless, by some miracle, nearly everyone, or literally everyone, decides to switch from like 500 of those servers to the other 100, Amazon will need to start doing server merges. Now, they set themselves up for this. This is intended with world clusters, and we all knew it would happen, but with the sheer number of new servers that they opened during launch, they all but guaranteed it will happen in large numbers and frequently, rather than becoming an occasional thing. And that's a problem, because one of the larger company mechanics in this game, arguably the largest company mechanic, I would say, that people absolutely do care about, in the more organized groups especially, which, again, there's like a kind of a congregation forming, like people gravitate towards those large companies, and those large companies do care about territory, is territory control, right? Like they own their own territory. You get some land, you have taxes. You control the auction house or what upgrades get built. And as an example, Everfall, on my server in the past week or so, made like 300,000 gold from our server economy. Maybe it was less than that, but it's a whole hell of a lot. Well, how can you possibly merge identical maps into one another and preserve all the ownership? Short answer, you can't do it. When a server merge occurs, unless the server is so depopulated that not a single company cares about their territory, which is probably not possible, Amazon will need to strip the territory from one company and give it to another. That is going to be an absolute disaster. And yes, the impulse might be to take it back, thereby participating in the PvP system that they want us to participate in, but the fatigue factor of the current system will have kicked in long before that point in time, which makes the entire thing a vicious cycle of stripping things from companies during merges and requiring them to burn out again after the merge to get it back. Maybe there's a way around this by requiring a battle before the server merge or some kind of system that they can come up with, but right now it just looks really bleak on that front. It all comes back to the idea of critical mass. Servers in this game require a huge amount of low-level resources for high levels to be comfortable progressing. It's a symbiotic relationship, and it's actually really cool when it functions properly. Servers require a semi-equal number of players and companies to not only exist, but to be simultaneously online at nearly all hours of the day and night, because if they aren't, conflict wars can be declared in minutes with a Zerg, and actually there's a rubber banding mechanic to make it easier and easier to declare war because they want wars to constantly happen, but again, it's fatiguing. And if those wars are lost and even one or two large companies transfer during the window where there's free server transfers or quit the game for whatever reason or even just take a short break, the three-way faction conflict falls apart. When one side ends up dominating the map and that balance is broken, which is probably going to happen on most servers pretty quickly, it will deter most players, not all, but most, from joining that server under any other banner. And that right there strips one of the integral portions of the game right out of the equation. Not to mention the market glut, the server merges, the lack of new characters, and the 600 total servers, most of which will never be populated again. I am now extremely worried about the future for this game. I know the devs are working hard, I know it's still relatively early, but I see a player population that is headed for an actual cliff right now. And when it falls off, the snowball is going to self-perpetuate and it's going to pick up speed every second of every day. Hopefully Amazon can think about these issues and come up with some fixes, like only allowing server transfers to specific servers or actually forcing everyone off of select servers in that same window, but then you would be forcing people from their company territory, which doesn't bode well for player metrics. Like, there's always a downside. I don't know. They really didn't set themselves up well with this. Hopefully, actually, I would say they immediately need to on most, nearly all servers. Hopefully they reopen new character creation. That's just gotta happen. Because the market effects are only going to become more obvious as time goes on. Again, most people might not see it right now, but they're gonna become obvious. And personally, I have a lot left to do. I am still working on a review for this game, like a real review for this game, and I'm nowhere near done. But right now I'm scared for the game's future, because the puzzle pieces I see connecting, even if I'll continue to play it pretty much no matter what, are going, like, all the puzzle pieces are coming together in all the wrong ways. I hope I'm wrong, but I want to make a video and discuss it because, yeah, it's pretty worrying. That's it. If you want to play New World, we are on the Heliopolis server as the Marauder faction, and if you want to fight against us, then join and just do a different faction. If you want to support the channel, there are links down below. A YouTube platform alternative, Locals, where $5 a month makes it possible for me to dedicate a week straight to an MMO so that my review can be worthy and not an incomplete, low-level mess. And a few more links as well, like another gaming YouTuber who covers New World to check out. But honestly, yeah, I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.